Tonight, a political prescription for national Pharmacare. The NDP and the Liberals reach a deal. The drug costs set to be covered.
This is a historic first. This is a big step forward.
And the push for a clear timeline. Travel turbulence, the chaos as Lynx Air suddenly shuts down.
They said that it was canceled.
Also standing in solidarity with Ukraine on the eve of a grim anniversary.
I live inside of war.
Plus, the climate of concern as warm weather shutters ski hills in BC. And a tipping point on the moon.
And caught a foot in the surface, and the lander has tipped like this.
The first image from a lunar lander on its side, but still on its mission.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. Canadians struggling under the weight of costly medications could soon see relief. A new deal has been reached between the Liberals and the NDP, the first step towards a national Pharmacare plan. It's set to offer people access to free diabetes drugs and birth control. CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelos, joins us with the details. Vashi, just how significant will this be for Canadians?
Well, Heather, this agreement is potentially incredibly significant for Canadians, particularly the 1 in 5 Canadians who don't have any drug coverage. I'll add a caveat to that, though. On the face of it, it could be very significant, but the devil will really be in the details. What Mr. Singh conveyed to me in an interview earlier today was that there was an agreement in principle that there is legislation that will be tabled this week that does a lot for universal single-payer Pharmacare and the coverage of contraceptives and diabetes medication. But here's where it gets a bit tricky. What kind of timelines are attached to that? How soon could that coverage be coming to Canadians? It sounds like from what Mr. Singh told me, it could be sooner rather than later when it comes to those medications for contraceptives and diabetes. But there is no timeline, from what I can garner from what he said, on exactly how long it will take to implement a universal single-payer Pharmacare system. I pushed him a bit on it. Here's what he had to say.
We have laid out the foundation with this legislation, which is what we wanted to do. And I've been very convinced that if we really want to move forward, the best way to do that is select more new Democrats. The Liberals have dragged their feet. The Conservatives definitely don't want this. If this is something that matters to you, we are the ones driving it.
So the framing, as you hear there from the NDP, is very much, we're going to get it introduced through the government, but you'd have to elect us if you actually want to see it implemented. So that's a big difference in the degree to which it will impact Canadians. We'll definitely keep our eye on the actual piece of legislation when it is tabled to see what those details are. The other thing I would highlight just before I turn things back over to you, Heather, is that there are a number of provinces, Quebec, Alberta, potentially New Brunswick as well, who say that they aren't sold on this idea and that they would look to potentially opt out if it does happen. So that'll be another big hurdle to clear as well. Heather?
All right, Vashi, thank you for this. Now to the latest turbulence in Canada's airline industry. Passengers booked on Lynx Air left struggling to figure out flights after the ultra-low-cost carrier announced it's shutting down. CTV's Jeremy Charon has more.
Grounded for good, Lynx Air is abruptly halting operations, now just days away from parking its planes. Passengers left scrambling.
We're just here for a little beach and sun, and to visit family, and things have gone horribly awry.
Paul Naiman was set to fly home from Florida with his sick grandfather Tuesday. That flight has been canceled. The new tickets a day later on an Air Canada flight, costing them nearly double.
I tried to book a ticket, and about 15 minutes later, the price went up about $1,000, and it's cost us $2,000 for 3 one-way tickets.
The Calgary-based low-cost airline, which only launched in 2022, says flights are going ahead through the weekend, but it's fully ceasing operations as of midnight Monday, adding that passengers with existing bookings are advised to contact their credit card company to secure refunds for pre-booked travel.
Quite often, bankruptcy does not fall under chargebacks. Credit card providers, they're going to charge you back to Lynx, but if they're bankrupt, they're not getting their money back.
In Toronto, reports of issues with Lynx flights already today.
They're going to tax you out and then cancel your flight, because they've been doing that to all the flights today.
Staff at Pearson offering help to impacted travelers. The company has cited compounding financial pressures associated with inflation, fuel costs, and exchange rates as some of the financial headwinds it couldn't overcome.
A difficult environment for airlines to make money in Canada because of the regulatory environment that we have in Canada, the number of competitors, and the seasonality.
Both WestJet and Air Canada say they're taking measures to try and help affected passengers.
Now, Transport Minister Pablo Rodriguez says he's been in touch with the company and expects them to refund travelers whose fares won't be honored. But Lynx Air has filed for creditor protection, Heather, and hasn't promised any refunds.
Jeremy, thank you. The Mounties say they are actively managing an alarming cyber attack targeting its networks. A criminal investigation has been launched. The force said in a statement there's no impact on its operation and no known threat to the safety of Canadians. The extent of the security breach is still being assessed. To Ukraine now, where people are preparing to mark 2 years since Russia's full-scale military invasion. The impact of Russia's war of aggression immense for those who have endured relentless shelling in cities and fighting on the front lines. CTV's Heather Wright is in Kyiv with more on how Ukrainians are marking this somber milestone. Heather.
2 years ago, Heather, many thought Russia would take control of Ukraine in a matter of weeks. With the help of the international community, Ukrainian resistance has proven to be strong, but they have paid and continue to pay a high price in a war that shows no signs of ending.
Fresh burial plots in Kyiv's military cemetery are a bitter testament to the high cost of a war no one here wanted. Varvar's husband Ruslan was killed back in December during heavy fighting in Bakhmut. She visits his grave with friends and food, one of the many made a widow by this grinding war. We are brave, we are courageous, she says. We are dying on our native lands, but we really need help from the whole world. Flags from around the world are here, many of them civilians who signed up to fight. A maple leaf is among them, honoring 2 Canadians, Cole Zelenko and Kyle Porter. They served together and died together when they were hit by Russian shelling last spring. On Saturday, Ukraine will mark the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. But for many, this war began long before.
So I live inside of war, if I can say so, inside of war for 10 years already.
When pro-Russian forces entered Ukraine and took control of the Donbas region in 2014, Sergei and his wife were forced to flee their home in Donetsk with only the bags they could carry.
I can tell you exactly 3. 2 in my hands and 1 in my wife.
He doesn't think he will ever go back to his home. He doesn't even know if it's still standing. Towns and villages throughout the east have been destroyed in a war that has killed tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians. In Odessa, more casualties reported today. A Russian drone strike killed 3. Across the country, in Lviv, the Danish Prime Minister joined Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to pay tribute to soldiers killed in action. More fresh graves for those lost in a war, entering its 3rd year.
Today, Ukrainian officials said they are investigating more than 122,000 suspected war crimes, something Russia has repeatedly denied. But Ukraine and Western allies say they have evidence of murder, deportation, and other crimes that date back to the beginning of the war. Heather.
Reporting from Kyiv tonight, CTV's Heather Wright. Thank you. Canada imposed a new round of sanctions today to try and damage Russia's ability to wage its war in Ukraine. Ottawa added 10 individuals, including Vladimir Putin's longtime aide, and 153 Russian entities to its sanctions list. The announcement was made in coordination with the UK and the US, which itself unveiled more than 500 sanctions, its biggest since the war began. Since the start of the war, Canada has welcomed more than 200,000 Ukrainians into the country. Many refugees found shelter and support from Canadians who opened up their homes. CTV's Sarah Plowman on the family who fled conflict, now determined to pay it forward.
Far from the front lines, donations are a form of defiance. At Halifax's Ukrainian store, a donation center, volunteers offer newcomers help and hope.
It's my friends, it's my new family in this country.
Everybody.
When Russia invaded Ukraine, families like the Barakovs left thinking they'd soon return. 2 years later, they live in Truro, Nova Scotia.
2 years ago, I didn't speak English. Every day we learn English.
Their first year in Canada, the families lived with the Sandisons, strangers who connected through Facebook.
We feel very blessed that this family landed in our backyard.
Roman was an entrepreneur in Ukraine and found work as a roofer. Yulia, his wife, was a midwife and is now a housekeeper at a nursing home. They saved and recently bought a house.
All my family are really happy for it.
In December, the Barakovs welcomed another Ukrainian family. The Kalivniks live in the basement apartment.
We saw this, how Canadians people help my family. We think maybe we will do it too.
We don't feel here like alone, lonely. We feel the support of these people.
Back at the Ukrainian store, generosity is on display. Support for Ukraine takes many forms. Here it's as simple as something to wear or a place to sit. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Halifax.
In the Middle East, Israel's prime minister presented his cabinet with a post-war vision for Gaza. Under the plan, Israel would control security there indefinitely. Hamas could not return to power, and Gaza's border with Egypt would be cut off to prevent militants from smuggling in weapons. Palestinian officials say it's doomed to fail. For those seeking asylum in Canada, there is growing concern they may not be getting supports quickly enough. There are renewed calls for action following the death of an asylum seeker outside a Toronto area shelter, the second death at the facility in 3 months. CTV's Beth McDonnell has more.
With the hope of a better future, Delphina Gigi's new life in Canada ended just days after she arrived. The 46-year-old Kenyan widow and mother of 4 left her children back home and struggled finding a place to stay.
It is very devastating to our community that we are going to be sending them her remains.
Community members say Saturday Gigi was brought to this Mississauga shelter by a Good Samaritan and in freezing temperatures waited between 1 and 8 p.m. before being let in the lobby. Police say paramedics were called Sunday. She then suffered a cardiac event and died in hospital.
It's a terrible coincidence that she died under these circumstances.
Brampton's mayor, a member of Peel Region Council, says with no overflow beds available for Gigi, she stayed in the shelter lobby overnight.
We got some federal funding, $10 million, towards this surge in our shelter capacity. I found out yesterday we're now at 400% capacity. This is not a problem that is restricted to Toronto and Montreal. You know, this is the doorsteps at Pearson right now.
The influx of asylum claimants has been putting extreme pressure on the GTA's shelter system for months. In November, a man from Nigeria camping outside the same shelter also died.
To our leaders of Canada, we've been shouting and we've been protesting, asking you to step up to the plate.
Brampton's mayor says in a country as prosperous as Canada, asylum claimants shouldn't be falling through the cracks. And he's meeting with the federal immigration and refugee minister on Monday to find solutions. Heather?
Beth, thank you. The sparse snowpack in BC is a cause for concern for ski resorts around Metro Vancouver. Temporary closures have become all too common, and the dismal snow season may be a glimpse of the future. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson has more.
February on Mount Seymour is supposed to look and sound something like this. Not today. Hikers have the place to themselves. The lifts locked off, every run closed.
Honestly shocked. Like, obviously it's a ski hill, so you'd expect tons and tons of snow.
Temporary closures have been common this season on the Lower Mainland's North Shore Mountains. Across the province, the snowpack is down 40%. Going forward, experts who study climate change expect this will be the new normal.
By about 2050, the year that we had is going to be the average year. If it's going to be an El Nino year, well, you might want to maybe not buy a season pass.
Those are ominous words for a $2 billion industry in BC.
Tourism, for the amount of money it brings into the economy, for employment, this could have a serious dent on BC.
He predicts resorts at lower elevations will need to heavily promote summer attractions and get creative simply to survive. The poor conditions on mountains surrounding Metro Vancouver have actually provided a boost to resorts in other areas of BC. Big White near Kelowna in the interior just had one of its busiest weekends in years. Many here making the 5-hour drive from the big city.
Local mountains, just snowboarding on rock and grass, so we're out here where there's some snow.
Decades from now, it's a migration that may become mandatory.
There's always winners and losers, right? So the winners, of course, will be resorts where there will still be snow.
Resorts now facing less competition and able to charge more for what could become a much more exclusive pastime. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, North Vancouver.
Coming up, the latest mission on the moon.
It was quite a spicy 7-day mission.
A lunar lander on its side. Plus, who's at your door? Companies extorting customers. A W5 investigation. There is a massive problem that starts with a simple knock on the door. Companies allegedly renting out home equipment for much more than it would cost to buy outright. Then they use the home as collateral. W5's John Woodward on the tens of thousands of Ontario homes being held hostage.
Lamel Ricketts bought a water softener from a door-to-door salesman in 2017.
And I believe they took advantage of his spirit and his kindness.
His daughter Diana says it was worth about $1,000 to buy outright, but over the 10-year contract he signed, it would cost him $8,000.
They totally took advantage. On the paperwork, you can see a squiggly, shaky signature of my dad.
Lamel passed away almost 6 years ago, but the contract lived on in the form of another $10,000 hold on her dad's property, which threw a wrench into their plans to sell the house. He's not the only person who signed contracts with a web of companies and ended up with what's called a Notice of Security Interest, or NOSI, on their property. A NOSI is a dollar amount with no limit, registered by the company as collateral for the equipment being rented.
I was filled with regret.
Peter Pham is among those joining a proposed class action suit that alleges several Ontario companies, now under the umbrella of the Simply Group, are extorting customers into paying out these NOSIs before they can sell or refinance their home.
You're paying like $30,000 for something that's worth like $3,000 or $4,000.
The Simply Group's former CEO Lawrence Krimker has said in legal documents he was not responsible for the terms in these contracts. In a written statement to W5, the company says, "We firmly believe in serving our customers with transparency, accountability, and compliance with industry standards in all of our practices." Former customers say these companies are taking advantage of vulnerable homeowners.
And the people responsible haven't come to their justice. I need justice.
The Ontario government says it's looking at changing the rules, something these customers say can't come soon enough. John Woodward, CTV News, Air, Ontario.
And you can see the full W5 investigation tomorrow night. Who's at Your Door airs on Saturday at 7 p.m. on CTV. Still ahead, a league apart.
What you're doing there, you shouldn't be doing that.
The unsolicited advice from a stranger to someone playing like a pro. When it comes to golf, it seems everyone's an expert, ready to chime in with a tip or two like this.
What you're doing there, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be right through, just trying to follow through. You're doing too slow on the way up. Back.
Okay. A stranger at the driving range keeps interrupting with unsolicited advice, then even takes credit for her swing.
See how much better that was?
Yeah, thank you. I don't think that was Little did he know, Georgia Ball is actually a PGA pro. She laughed it off and thanked the man for his pointers. And a fitting discovery in the year of the dragon. The remains of a 240 million-year-old marine reptile that resembles the mythical Chinese dragon have been found in China. The 16-foot complete fossil has allowed scientists to depict the strange prehistoric creature in its entirety for the very first time. It is time for a short break. Coming up, a moon landing, the latest leap for private space flight. An American spacecraft on the moon, the first since the Apollo era, is said to be alive and well. Though it's not perfect, landing on its side, still officials are optimistic about its abilities. CTV's Kamal Kramali now with what this means for the future of space exploration.
This is the first image from the U.S. spacecraft Odysseus, fired back down to Earth. The picture also
It was quite a spicy 7-day mission.
Sending a surge of relief, proof the unmanned vessel is okay after a shaky landing.
And caught a foot in the surface, and the lander has tipped like this. And we believe this is the orientation of the lander on the moon.
Still coming close to its targeted site near the moon's south pole. It's now communicating with plenty of power.
The technology performed flawlessly. Better than expected performance.
It's an autonomous Nova-C class lunar lander named Odysseus.
It's the first time a lunar lander has been created by a private company, Intuitive Machines, allowing the United States to return to the moon for the first time in over 50 years.
One of the nice things about a commercial lander is that it kind of opens things up. They may have a little more flexibility for other payloads that they want to consider, and so it lets people be more creative.
But right before touchdown, the lander's navigation system failed. The team resorted to a backup plan, NASA's laser landing system. What followed was several tense minutes.
And we are transmitting. So, congratulations, IM team.
Then a muted reaction. When the lunar lander only sent back a weaker than expected signal.
There was a tense moment where we did not have regular communications, but our dedicated radio and ground operations crew found the signal.
And with NASA planning to send astronauts to the moon in 2026, what this little vessel finds could be a new dawn for U.S. space exploration. Kamal Kramali, CTV News, Toronto.
That's our show for this Friday. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.